Hello, dear students. Welcome back. We are doing the chapter The Happy Prince written by Oscar Wilde. The story so far. Once there stood the statue of a happy prince, and it was installed on a tall column in the city. People called the statue as the Happy Prince. The statue, which was covered with gold, it had two bright sapphires fixed in the eyes and a large ruby studded in the sword hilt. Once a little swallow came there and sat at the feet of the statue. The swallow wanted to spend the night there, but as it was about to sleep, few drops of water fell on him. When the swallow looked up, it saw that the tears were coming from the eyes of the happy prince. The prince told the swallow that when he was alive, he knew no tears. He led a happy life, but after his death, now he could see the miseries of the life, the people, that how they were helpless, they were suffering. And the happy prince requested the swallow to help the seamstress who was embroidering flowers on the gown of the queen. The swallow accepted the request, although it wanted to go to Egypt. But on seeing the happy prince feeling bad for the poor people, the swallow agreed to help. And then the swallow took the ruby from the sword and gave it to the seamstress. After doing this noble cause, the swallow felt that although it was cold outside, but he was feeling warm. And it said that it was quite curious. The happy prince told the swallow that how, as it had done a good deed, and that's why he was feeling warm. So we'll start from here, page number 30, the last paragraph. So when the day broke, he flew down to the river and had a bath. Tonight I go to Egypt, said the swallow, and he was in high spirits at the prospect. In high spirits mean very enthusiastic, very cheerful. So the swallow, it woke up next morning, went to the river, took a bath there. The swallow was quite happy that he would be going to the Egypt then. So he visited all the monuments and sat long on top of the church steeple. Church steeple means the church tower. When the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince. Have you any commissions for Egypt? He cried. I am just starting. So here the swallow, it started visiting the places of the city the whole day, and he sat long for a long time on the top of the church steeple too. So at night time, the swallow came to the happy prince and took permission from him and asked if there was anything that he wanted to bring for it, or if there was any message that he could carry towards Egypt. But the prince said, Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you stay with me one night longer? The swallow said, I'm waited for in Egypt. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Far away across the city, I see a young man in a garret. Garret is an attic, a room which is made near the roof side. So this young man was sitting in the garret. He is leaning over a desk covered with papers, and in the glass by his side there is a bunch of withered violets. His hair is brown and crisp, and his lips are red as pomegranate, and he has large and dreamy eyes. He is trying to finish a play for the director of a theatre, but he is too cold to write any more. There is no fire in the grate, and hunger has made him faint. So now, here the happy prince is telling the swallow about the second work that he wanted the swallow to do. He says that far away across the city, he could see a small room, dark room, at the top of the house, and a young man was sitting there. He was sitting on the desk on which the papers were spread all over. He was trying to work hard. He had a glass lying near him in which some withered flowers were lying. Withered means dried flowers. And his hair was brown and crisp. So further the happy prince, he started giving the description of the boy, that how his hair were brown and crisp, which meant that he had not taken bath for a long time. His lips were red like pomegranate. Pomegranate, anar की तरह बिल्कुल red. He had big, dreamy eyes. This means that the boy was very ambitious and hardworking. So he also further added that how the boy he wanted to finish the writing of the play. He was a writer. He was a playwright. And but he says that because of the cold, excessive cold there, as there was no fire in the grate. Grate means the fireplace where the fire is actually put there. So there was no fire in the fireplace, and he was very hungry, and due to which he was feeling very weak, and that's why he was not able to complete the plate. I will wait with you one night longer, said the swallow, who really had a good heart. He asked if he should take another ruby to the young playwright. The swallow understood what Happy Prince was trying to tell him here, and he knew that the prince wanted to help this boy. So he agreed to stay back for one more night. And then further, the swallow asked Happy Prince if he should take another ruby stone to give it to the young playwright. So, just like he had given it to the old lady. So he asked if he should take another ruby to the young playwright. Alas, I have no ruby now, said the prince. But the prince said that he did not have any more ruby stones with him because he had only one ruby on the sword hilt. My eyes are all that I have left. They are made of rare sapphires which were brought out of India 1,000 years ago. So, the happy prince, he said that he did not have any ruby, and he told the swallow that now he had his eyes which were made of very precious and rare stone. Those were sapphires, and these sapphires had been brought 1,000 years ago from India. He ordered the swallow to pluck out one of them and take it to the playwright. So the happy prince, he told the swallow to take out one sapphire and give it to the boy. He said he will sell it to the jeweler and buy firewood and finish his play. He said, Dear prince, said the swallow, I cannot do that. And he began to weep. The swallow was very sad to learn that the happy prince wanted to give his eye to the boy. And he started crying. He felt bad for the prince because he was going to be blind from one eye. He told the happy prince that he could not do so. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, do as I command you. So he said that. So the swallow, the prince, he requested the swallow, and he said that, please do as I ask you to do. And thus, so the swallow plucked out the prince's eye and flew to the young man's garret. It was easy enough to get in as there was a hole in the roof. Through this he darted and came into the room. Darted means pushed himself inside. The young man had his head buried in his hand, so he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wings. And when he looked up, he found the beautiful sapphire lying on the withered violets. So the happy prince, he ordered the swallow to do what he had told him to do. And the swallow took out one eye, the sapphire, out of prince's eye, and flew to the young man's garret. And there was a hole on the roof of the room, so the swallow entered the room easily. The boy was sitting with his head on his hands. He was excessively tired, feeling weak, and that's why he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wing. But when he looked up, he saw the sapphire stone lying on the dried flowers, those withered violet flowers. I am beginning to be appreciated, he cried. This is from some great admirer. Now I can finish my play. And he looked quite happy. Appreciate means to praise someone. So when the boy saw the beautiful stone, he felt that some admirer, some person who praised him, had sent a gift for him. So he thought that with this he could now finish his play. The next day, the swallow flew down to the harbor. He sat on the mast of a large vessel and watched the sailor working. I'm going to Egypt, cried the swallow. But nobody minded, and when the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince. Harbor, harbor कहते हैं seaport को. So next morning, the swallow bird flew down to the harbor and sat on the mast of a ship. And he spoke loudly that he was going to Egypt. And when it was night, he flew back to Happy Prince. But when he shouted loudly, no one bothered as everybody was busy there in their own work. So Swallow, he went to the prince again. He said, I am come to bid you goodbye, he cried. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, will you not stay with me one night longer? Now, once again, the happy prince requested the swallow to stay with him for one more night. It is winter, answered the swallow, and the snow will soon be here. In Egypt, the sun is warm on the green palm trees, and the crocodiles lying in the mud and look lazily about them. The swallow said to the happy prince that the winter season had started, and after some time it would start snowing. The weather in Egypt was warm, and even the crocodiles lay on the mud lazily there. And he told the happy prince to let him go to Egypt. But the prince said, in the square below there stands a little match girl. She has let her matches fall in the gutter, and they are all spoiled. Her father will beat her if if she does not bring home some money. And she is crying. She has no shoes, stockings, and her little head is bare. Pluck out my other eye and give it to her, and her father will not beat her. So, this was now the third assignment which was given to the swallow. The happy prince said that there was a match girl, and she was a little girl, and all her matchsticks had fallen in the gutter. Gutter refers to the sewage and had got wet. All her matchsticks were spoiled, so she could not sell them, and she would not earn any money. And when she would go home without money, her father would get angry and beat her. And for this reason, the girl was crying. Further, the happy prince said that she was not wearing shoes or stockings and she had not covered her head. She was very poor. So he said to the swallow to take out another sapphire from his eyes and give it to her so that her father didn't beat her. I will stay with you one night longer, said the swallow, but I cannot pluck out your eye. You would be quite blind then. The swallow agreed to stay with him for one more night. But he again took pity on the happy prince and he refused to take out another sapphire because if he did that, happy prince would be blind. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, do as I command you. Again, happy prince told swallow to do what he had ordered him. So he plucked out Prince's other eye, and darted down with it. He swooped past the match girl and slipped the jewel into the palm of her hand. What a lovely bit of glass, cried the little girl, and she ran home laughing. Swoop means fly very low and in a quick manner. So finally, Swallow obeyed the happy prince's order. He took another sapphire stone from his eye and flew to the little match girl. When he saw the match girl, he bent very low and kept the sapphire stone on the little girl's hand. And the girl was very happy to see the stone and she went home happily. Then the swallow came back to the prince. You are blind now, he said, so I will stay with you always. So when the swallow came back, he told the prince that he had become totally blind and he had given up the idea of going back to Egypt. No, little swallow, said the poor prince, you must go away to Egypt. So the swallow refused, and the prince insisted that the swallow must return to Egypt. The swallow again said, no, I will stay with you always, said the swallow, and he slept at the prince's feet. So the swallow, he refused again. He decided that he would stay with the prince, and thus he slept that night on the princess's feet. All the next day, he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him stories of what he had seen in the strange land. Now, as a swallow, he had visited many places. He had been to different places. So that morning, the swallow, he stayed with the happy prince all the day. And he told the swallows of different stories of different places that he had visited. Dear little swallow, said the prince, you tell me of marvelous things, but more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and women. There is no mystery so great as misery. Fly over my city, little swallow, and tell me what you see there. The happy prince, he said to the swallow that he told him about wonderful things, but said that nothing was more wonderful than the suffering of people. No mystery was bigger than sadness, and he wanted to know that how many people were sad in the kingdoms, who all were there who were still sad. And he asked the swallow to go and tell him what he saw while flying over the city. So the swallow flew over the great city and saw the rich making merry in their beautiful houses while the beggars were sitting at the gates. He flew into the dark lanes and saw the white faces of starving children looking out listlessly at the black street. The swallow again obeyed Happy Prince, and he flew and took a round over the city. He saw that the rich people, they were living a happy life in their beautiful houses. They were partying there, while on the other hand, the poor people, they were begging sitting outside the gates. Then he went to the dark lanes where there was no light and also the poor people lived. He saw that the children were hungry, due to which their faces had turned white. Under the archway of the bridge, two little boys were lying in each other's arms to try and keep themselves warm. So, further, the swallow, he also saw that under the archway of the bridge, there were two boys lying with each other, and they were hugging each other as they wanted to keep themselves warm. They were so poor that did not have food, and they were lying there trying to keep each other warm. How hungry we are, they said. You must not lie here, shouted the watchman, and they wandered out in the rain. So the watchman saw them lying there, and he shouted at them that they should not lie there. And they made them go away. He made them go away from there. The poor children, they ran in the rain as they were homeless. They had to leave the place because the watchman was after them. Then he flew back. He, the swallow, flew back and told the prince what he had seen. I'm covered with fine gold, said the prince. You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to the poor. The living always think that gold can make them happy. So the happy prince, he told the swallow that his body was covered with fine gold. He could take tiny pieces of gold from his body and give it to the poor people in need. All the living beings require money, and when they would get gold, they would feel happy. So when he heard from the swallow the misery of the people, he asked the swallow to take the gold leaf from his body and give it to the poor people. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow picked off till the happy prince looked quite dull and grey. So gradually, slowly, the swallow took out the gold layers from the statue of Happy Prince. And as he removed the layers of gold, the Happy Prince statue started to look dull and grey. So leaf after leaf let off the fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played in the street. We have bread now, they cried. So, as the statue of the happy prince was looking dull and grey, the children they grew happier and rosier and merrier as they got the gold. They were going to get food to eat by selling those leaves of gold. Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost. So it started snowing, and when a lot of snow fell, everything froze. So it was now extremely cold at that time. The streets looked as if they were made of silver. Everybody went about in furs, and the little boys wore scarlet caps and skated on the ice. Winter had started. Everyone was wearing clothes made of fur. The street looked as if they were made of silver. And small children, they were wearing red color caps and were roaming here and there. They were skating on the ice. But the poor little swallow grew colder and colder. But he would not leave the prince. He loved him too well. He picked up crumbs outside the baker's door when the baker was not looking and tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. As the swallow had promised the prince, he did not leave him. And the swallow started to survive on the food which was left at the door by the baker when he was not looking. He used to steal the food from there, and he used to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. But at last he knew that he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. And "Goodbye, dear prince," he murmured. "Will you let me kiss your hand?" So the swallow was aware that he was about to die. He had only enough strength left to fly back to the statue of the happy prince, and he said goodbye to him. And he took permission if he would allow him to kiss his hand. "I'm glad that you are going to Egypt. At last, little swallow," said the prince. "You have stayed too long here, but you must kiss me on my lips, for I love you." And the happy prince thought that the swallow wanted to go to Egypt. So he said that he was happy that finally the bird was going to Egypt. And the happy prince, he asked the swallow to kiss him on his lips. "It is not to Egypt that I am going," said the swallow. "I am going to the house of death. Death is the brother of sleep, is he not?" And he kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell down dead at his feet. So the happy prince, the swallow, they had become good friends. Happy Prince said to the swallow that it had stayed there for with him very long, so he should go to Egypt, and he wanted that the bird should kiss him on his lips because he loved the bird. But the swallow, he told the Happy Prince that he was not going to Egypt. He said that he was going to the house of death. He added that death was a brother of sleep, and thus he kissed the happy prince, and then he fell to the feet of the happy prince and died. At that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue as if something had broken. The fact is that the leaden heart had snapped right into two. It certainly was a dreadfully hard frost. So, as soon as the bird died on the feet of Happy Prince, an unusual sound came out from the statue. The sound was of the breaking of statue's heart, which was made of lead. The heart broke because of the death of his beloved bird. The heart could not bear the pain of separation, and thus it broke into two. The author said that it was so cold that the heart broke into two pieces. An ironical statement that, of course, the frost was too hard that it broke the heart. Ironical in the sense, the सरकाजम इन द सेंस कि हाँ ठंड वाकई में बहुत ज्यादा थी कि वो दिल भी दो टुकड़े में टूट गया. Ironically, he wants to say that the heart could not bear the separation from the bird, and thus it broke into two. Early next morning, the mayor was walking in the square and square below in company with the town councillor. As they passed the column, he looked up at the statue. Dear me, how shabby the happy prince looked, he said. Shabby means untidy. So the next morning, the mayor of the city, mayor is the person who looks after the city, the law and order in the city. So he came there and along with his councillors, and he was taking a round of the area where the statue of Happy Prince was erected. When he crossed the statue and looked at it, he said that the statue of the prince looked untidy. He was surprised to see the condition of the statue. How shabby indeed, cried the town councillors, who always agreed with the mayor, and they went up to look at it. The councillors, they always followed the mayor and agreed whatever he used to say, so they also asserted that yes, the statue looked untidy. The ruby had fallen out of his sword, his eyes are gone, and he is golden no longer, said the mayor. So the mayor noticed that the ruby was gone, and the sapphires from the eyes were missing, and the layer of the gold from the body was also missing. So he was quite disappointed on seeing the statue in this condition. In fact, he's little better than a beggar, better than a beggar, said the town councillor. So the mayor, when he looked at the statue, it seemed that as if the statue of a beggar, but he said that it was still better than a beggar, and the town councillors agreed with him. And here is actually a dead bird at his feet, continued the mayor. So the mayor, he saw that there was also a bird lying at the feet of the statue. He said, we must really issue a proclamation that the birds are not allowed to die here. And the town clerk made a note to the suggestion. So when the mayor saw that a dead bird was lying, he told the town councillor to pass an order. Proclamation means to pass an order, to make an announcement that birds were not allowed to die at the feet of the statue, and the town clerk made a note of the suggestion given to him. So they pulled down the statue of the prince. As he is no longer beautiful, he is no longer useful, said the art professor at the university. So the art professor of the university said that now, as the statue of Happy Prince did not look beautiful, it was not useful anymore. So they should demolish it. They should remove the statue from the place. Then they melted the statue in the furnace. Furnace is a place where metals are melted. So they melted the statue, which was made of lead, in the furnace. What a strange thing, said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry. Overseer refers to the supervisor who works at the foundry. Foundry is a workshop for casting metals where metals are molded. The supervisor of the foundry saw a strange thing. The broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace. We must throw it away. So here, the heart of the Happy Princess statue, which was broken into two pieces, was not melting in the furnace. So the supervisor, he found it to be useless, and he decided to throw it, and they threw it in the dust heap. So they threw it on the dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. Coincidentally, they threw the heart of the Happy Prince where the dead swallow was also lying. And thus we see that how they had found the heart useless. The lead heart did not melt. It is said that it is not easy to break the heart which is filled with love, and one cannot actually melt it. So it's a kind of, you can say, a statement, a symbolic statement referring that how the lead heart was not melting in the fire, and people find it useless. These kind of emotions are considered as useless by the people who are very materialistic in their attitude, people who only value money. So they found this heart to be useless, and thus they threw it away. In the concluding line, the scene of heaven is presented here, and God is speaking to his angels. Bring me the two most precious things in the city, said the God to one of his angels, and the angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. So God asked one of his angels to bring him the two most precious things of the city. And the angel brought the two pieces of the heart of the statue and the dead swallow bird. God said, "You have rightly chosen, for in my garden of paradise this little bird shall sing forever more, and in my city of gold the happy prince shall praise me." So God said to the angel that it had brought the right thing. The choice that he had made is very nice. And it had chosen the right thing, which were indeed the most precious things of the city. He said that the bird would always sing in the garden of the paradise, and the happy prince would stay in his city of gold and admire him. Thus, we see that even in the eyes of God, what is the thing that is respected? The thing which is filled with love, compassion for others. And thus, we see how this. The little swallow and the happy prince, they were considered as the most precious thing of the city. So, students, hope this chapter is clear to you. So, this chapter, the theme that is brought out through this chapter is that uh, we can say that Oscar Wilde stories have usually a moral in the lesson. And in the story, we come to know that love and compassion and consideration for others are great virtues. We are human, but it needs a lot of time and sacrifice to be humane. So, this story focuses our attention on the happy prince and a little bird, the swallow, showing that how we should be compassionate towards others, and we should also inculcate the virtues, and thus always be ready to sacrifice for the sake of humanity. So, this is all about the chapter Happy Prince. Thank you, students.